Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Monkey Business. I'm one of your hosts, Warren. I'm joined, as always, by the circuitously charming Carter. How's it going, Carter?
It's going good.
And the windingly winsome Will.
I'm dying inside.
So we're here today to discuss season one of Legion, series that released in early 2017 on FX. And as it so happens, in a fortuitous turn of events, our recording for this episode was delayed a few days. That actually affords us the perfect opportunity to congratulate Jean Smart, who of course plays Melanie Bird in this show, who just won her fifth Emmy yesterday. And for a little background context, Jean Smart actually, fun fact, won her first Emmy back in 2016 for her role in the series Fargo, which, as it turns out, just like Legion, was created and written by Noah Hawley. But I'm sure we'll discuss that more later on, given how enthusiastic Carter is about Fargo. But again, congrats to Jean Smart on actually back-to-back Emmy wins for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series. So it's a little fun fact there. So back to the story at hand today, Legion. So we open the story by meeting David Haller. He's a patient at Clockwork Psychiatric Hospital. He's diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he's our narrator and our point of view for much of the story. But it quickly materializes that he's an unreliable narrator, which makes for quite a fun viewing experience because at every turn you have to be piecing together not only what's real or not real, but also what order events are happening in, because we're not always told the story in sequential order. So as the story goes on, we meet Division 3, who's essentially a military branch. They're tasked with tracking down and dealing with, shall we say, special individuals. So when we first meet them, they're interrogating David, but it doesn't end so well for them when a group of strangers at the time helps David's, shall we say, David's girlfriend of 24 hours about Sid. So that group breaks David out. And as we learn more about them, we meet Melanie, the psychic leader, Patonomy, the fearless captain, Carrie, the nerd and the bruiser, and then, of course, our guy, poor Rudy, which I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that neither one of you remembered his name.
Was he the telekinesis guy or
He
the?
was.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Our guy, Rudy.
I mean, I figured he was the only one who was in the show, and with such a useful ability, it's really awesome. He makes two appearances.
Yeah. They didn't give him a lot of lines, so
Yep, it
No.
was a
that
rough
didn't make him
ending
too
for our guy,
too
Rudy.
memorable. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, so the story then dives into David's mind, which is where his story gets really cool. So we dive into David's mind, where lygophobia eerily plagues his scattered memories. The Radamanthine Melanie Patonomy dig deeper into missing and glitched memories, only to slowly realize that David's not the only one in his head. We ultimately learn that there's a parasitic mutant, the incomparable and volatile Amal Farouk, who's not only controlling and confusing, but also changing David's perception and memory of reality. So after Farouk attempts to essentially bury David in his own shattered mind, he embarks on a journey to discern the truth from all the lies he's heard his entire life. And with his newly effervescent psyche and a little help from his friends, David manages to temporarily take back control of his mind. And it all leads to the finale where Division 3 attacks this group's compound as Farouk makes his final play. And in the shuffle and kerfuffle, seemingly no one wins. So with that brief summary, it brings me to my first question. Who would you say the antagonist of this story is?
So in the exact way an antagonist is, right? Like the one who tries to make the story cease to progress. I'd probably go with Dr. Melanie Bird. She's the one who's just trying to reach base normal. And at base normal, David is allowed to have his story just kind of stop there to control power and stuff like that, but he then doesn't have to do anything. She wants to use him for a war, but she's also kind of willing, at least in this first season, to let him go. So
Hmm. Sometime in the future, we might have to have a discussion about how you define protagonist and antagonist, because I think by what you just said, that would make Dr. Bird the protagonist of the story, not the antagonist of the story. I
So
think wanting to finish, yeah.
Perhaps I should read us a definition of antagonist.
Yeah, I think wanting to stop the story is not what an antagonist does. I think that's closer to what a protagonist is
this
attempting to
is
do.
my bad.
You're good, you're good.
All right. So just as a point of reference here,
Yep.
according to my good friend dictionary.com, an antagonist is noun, a person who is opposed to, struggles against, or competes with another opponent, adversary.
Okay.
Are you sticking with your same answer there?
Well, yeah, I'd still keep it at either her or who's it, the ear? The guy who's chasing him down and stuff like
Oh,
that.
yeah, Walter,
Yeah, I think.
the guy with the creepy eye.
Yeah, and the curly red hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um
The ear,
I
the
thought that's
eye.
what they called him. I
Yeah, but
don't know. He's
he
a
just
body
works
part.
for yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Carter, I'm interested to hear your take on this.
Um, I think the obvious answer is his name Farouk,
Mhm.
the demon, the
The
parasite,
Shadow
the other
King.
mutant, the Shadow King. I would go with that, but I would be open to hear. I'm not open to an answer like Melanie Bird, but I am open to other answers. I'm even
That's
open to
fair.
that there might not be any. Just a lot of conflict.
So
Um,
I'm gonna put forth a
go
different
for it,
idea that neither of you have mentioned.
David.
So yes, obviously the obvious antagonist would be either Farouk or Division 3. But I think at the heart of it, the real antagonist is also our protagonist. I think David's the biggest antagonist as well as being the main protagonist of this story. And we can dive into that later, but I think
Yeah,
ultimately the person who is hindering David from achieving his goals and his journey the most is himself.
cool. So you say he's the main character, but is the antagonist.
Yes,
It's the man versus man situation, man versus self situation, not man versus man.
that's what I would argue.
Yeah.
Yes.
hmm
Or it could be man versus Melanie Bird, the old man versus Bird.
Everything I say, just disregard it. It's perfectly all right.
We have, and we will continue to.
I guess the next thing we can talk about is I really love Dan Stevens' acting in this. It's so good for playing so many different frames of mind and mental states. He's just such a good job of even just that first interview with Clark, where he's constantly like not finishing sentences and only having half thoughts and then switching gears and like his eyes are darting around. And I just thought his acting was so good. That was one of my favorite parts of this series, I think. Stan Stevens acting.
Yeah, I'd agree. I thoroughly enjoyed, I'm pretty sure all of the acting. For me, the weakest link is Aubrey Plaza.
What?
Yeah, it's a personal thing. For me, she's just one character the whole time. I understand that that's what the parasite is. I get that. But I kind of wanted a little bit more diversity in the way she acted and all that stuff, but I'm not upset about it. She's the weakest link in quite a few all-star performances. Really well done. I don't think it's bad. I just think again, she's the weakest. But yeah, from the get-go, he really does show the strain on his body and on his emotions and how those two mesh and come out. And everybody also does a very good job of playing off of his acting. And kudos to the director or directors. I don't know if there was more than one for everything as well to bring that out of the entire cast and to set it with music and to set it with visual aids and certain amounts of like CG and all that stuff too to really make a compelling story.
Spoiler alert. The next thing I was gonna say was how much I loved Aubrey Plaza's acting in this. Is they just let her go crazy and she's just acting like a crazy person the entire series. It's quite a bit of fun.
Yeah, I think every actor killed it. I think they all just really get their characters and they did it well. And I think the filmmaking really helps it, helps them expand farther than they could have been in lesser hands. I think every single episode just kind of lets the characters sit around and act how the actors think they would. Really well done stuff. I like their faces is something that really stuck out to me. It's not something you often see in TV shows, but they had a ton of just they weren't overusing close-ups, but they used them quite a bit and quite well. And just every time they cut to one, just the look on an actor's face just sold the character perfectly, sold the emotion of that moment perfectly. I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, I would agree. I think another thing that really sold it for me was just I don't even know what to call it, but just it's out of the box like weird factor, so to speak. There are just so many things that are just so bizarre and random that you just never see. Like there's the random guy and the ivy wall at Clockworks who's just like standing there staring at everyone. Like basically any scene with Oliver, just Oliver doing random stuff. Like he's playing dissonant jazz and like dancing around in a diving suit.
The best character in the show.
It's fantastic.
Not even said sarcastically or anything. I was riveted with his narration, and just when he's just walking around being a little crazy, he's like, I don't know what's going on here. Why is everything so cold? I can't fix that. But he's just got charm, he's got wit. And one thing I want to touch on as well is I hate when characters are incompetent when they have no reason to be. Every single character in the show is intelligent and aware of what their superpowers are, right? Sid is aware that she can't be touched. Ptonomy is fully aware how his superpower works inside of. Is it actually Ptonomy?
Yeah.
All right. Ptonomy is fully aware of how his power works inside of mind work. And then Carrie and Carrie are really in tune with who they are and how it makes each other feel. And the only person who doesn't know what's going on is David. But there's a very good reason for that, in the sense that the parasite wipes his memory every time he sees him, much akin to the Silence from Doctor Who, which is a really cool villain if any of you have seen that show. But I like intelligent characters. I love intelligent villains. And when the Eye was tracking them and shapeshifting and disguising himself and trapping them before they could be there, it really felt earned, and it felt well thought out. Not just, oh, would you look at that? The bad guy knew everything. It was a catch-all, blah, 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 blah. And I think that bleeds back into the writing to have a large cast of characters with large amounts of screen time each, and to blend that all together and to develop every single one. Yeah, really, really awesome. To not have just a character there who's present for a joke or present for a punchline, or something like that. Everyone builds the story up.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a very complex supporting cast. A lot of different characters with their own conflicting goals and everything. And I think that's probably best seen with a couple of the scenes where you have the group of these special people at their compound. They're talking with Melanie, and everyone has like different goals. So like Melanie wants to get Oliver back, and Ptonomy just wants to, wipe out the enemy, and Sid just wants to be with David. And like everyone has their own different agendas, and it's pretty rare, I think, to have a supporting cast with that many characters like all being together but with different goals and different agendas. Because I think a lot of times when you have that many characters in shows like this, they're usually in different geographical areas and different plot threads, and to have all the characters in so many scenes together is kind of cool.
Yeah, in one place. Okay. Yeah. So one thing that I really liked about this was just the way the story weaved. It uses all the weirdness, all the insanity, all the crazy visuals, and just the outrageous acting and the explosions of storytelling here and there that could have gone off the rails but really didn't. And many points at like the end of the episodes, really, like they just totally seem to throw everything out the window and kind of just restart again. This happens like at least 2, maybe 3 times within the season. But once you complete the season, once everything is in view, once you have the full view, and once you know the context for everything, it all fits together within itself like a perfect puzzle. I thought that was just really, really well done. I think they started with the end in mind and they worked backwards, is my theory. And they knew where they were going to go, and they knew how to construct that. And they wanted to make it this super confusing thing that people needed to piece together. And so they put stuff here and put stuff here, and were able to flip the script on the audience a few times, and it worked out really well. I like the weave of it all, how it just swished here and there.
Yeah, I think that was really cool. And that's a good point. Thinking backwards, I haven't thought about it like that, but it does really help with a story like this if you have the end in sight the whole time.
Mhm.
And I think sprinkled throughout, especially if you know how it ends and you're watching it again, I think there are a lot of hints and foreshadowing pieces sprinkled throughout so that you can tell what's going on if you know what to look for. But yeah, it was rather confusing the first time I watched it.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good foreshadowing, really just really complete storytelling. And it ends on, a lead into a second season, which they were hoping for at the time. But yeah, you have to have the end in mind in order to pull something like this off. And it's easy to, because many, many points during this, I was asking myself, where do you go from here? How do you figure out how to end this? How do you wrap something like this up in a way that doesn't feel really, really cheap and really, really lame or typical of something that just ends in a shootout? How do you top this episode? How do you top this episode? How do you come back from where you put yourself in after this episode? And they were able to every time because I think even though this show feels really, really big and really, really out there and crazy and weird, it has a through line and it stays on the tracks with its main character and its few supporting characters, and they do well.
This is a bit of a tangent, but I think that's one of the things that I look for a lot because how a story ends, I feel like it's a lot of times so difficult, especially and this is only, I would say, only loosely really in like the your classic superhero genre, but I think a lot of times the toughest part for any kind of story, even remotely like that, is the ending, because like we've seen stories like that so many times, it's really difficult to have a creative ending that still fits. And it's not really spoiling because we've already gone through the whole plot, but I really liked how the ending, nobody really won. In
Hmm.
a sense, like everybody achieved a little bit of what they wanted, but nobody actually really got what they wanted.
Yeah.
Obviously, Amal Farouk didn't really get what he wanted, but he escaped and lives to fight another day and escapes all of the people who were fighting him. Obviously, they wanted to eradicate him permanently, but he escaped, so they didn't really get what they wanted, and now they're kind of in a state of, they've lost Oliver, now they have to figure out where he went, where Farouk went, and nobody's very happy with how that ended. And then Division 3, suffered casualties, and they realized they're way out of their league, and now Farouk's on loose for them too. So everybody still has problems at the end of the series, or at the end of season 1.
Yeah, absolutely. Farouk also has problems, but I think he definitely got out of it the cleanest. He has his work cut out for him, and I feel like this season kind of wanted to apply that yeah, there's no winner just because it's not over, but he got away and he's on to do things that he wants to with a new mutant host.
So
So I think it was kind of semi-victorious for him.
I do have to be a little careful what I say to avoid spoiling season 2,
Okay.
but I will say there's more that Farouk wanted to do and still wants to
Okay.
do, and so I wouldn't really consider it a victory for Farouk either.
Okay.
But Farouk escaped, so it could have been worse.
Yeah. And then the questions of how does Oliver function as a host compared to David? So that's
Right.
something to be explored.
What about you, Will? What did you think of the ending?
Really liked it. I thought it was incredibly solid. I liked that all the characters had a certain tie-in. Sid, I think, is the character I root for the most in the show. And yeah, it was super selfish what she did, but I was really kind of happy that she got a happy-ish ending. Like she got to keep David in a way. But I'll say this, it didn't hook me to watch season 2. I was like, wow, okay, cool. Clean getaway for like everyone. No one really wins, but it's a great ending to the story. It doesn't feel cheap. I don't feel cheated. I was more like, oh, that's kind of neat. And then it ended there for me. If I would have nothing against doing season 2. It just didn't really grab at me to keep watching into the other season. I was very content and very pleased with the season as a whole. I loved every single character's progression, and just Oliver at the end, man, just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep, poor Oliver.
Yeah, and for Melanie, that just is, it just guts her. because she just got him back and now he's gone again in worse hands because now they know the consequences of what can happen to someone who Farouk has become attached to is that he only comes out if he wants to, or you can kill both, you know. But I agree with Carter. It is really interesting to see how the powers will work and all that stuff because Oliver has been in was it limbo? Is that the place? Is that what they call it, or is it something else?
Or
The
no,
astral plane.
the astral plane.
The
Yeah.
astral plane. He's been in the astral plane for so long. It's like, well, what did he learn? What does he know how to do? And he's also forgotten a whole lot. So the Oliver that they all know and love isn't really tied to anybody back at the base. So that was another reason I didn't really feel that bad, was because the character now didn't know what they were missing. We know what the character's missing, but the character doesn't know that they're kind of running away from the only family they ever had.
Well, except that one shot right before Farouk essentially possesses him, you see when he's on the ladder, he's like, "Oh, Melanie." He like
Yeah.
remembers right before that happens.
Yes, but it didn't pull at me enough to make me care about his eventual disappearance at the very end.
That's fair. Now, with what you're saying, do you think you would have been more invested in season 2 if it hadn't had such a, I guess, like a wrapped up ending, if it was more of a cliffhanger?
I would have disliked the season as a whole a little bit more, but I probably would have been hooked into season 2. And I think that's just the pro con of it. And I guess that'll come back to whether or not they had a confirmed budget for season 2 when they were filming season 1. And maybe they thought at the beginning, just end with a good thing, end with a resolved story, an open-ended story rather than a cliffhanger. And personally, I love that. But again, didn't really hook me in. So
It didn't, to me at least, seem at all like something that was trying to present itself as an open-ended story. It very much is a to be continued. However, I will be watching season 2. I'm hooked. So
Side praise.
yeah.
Well, one thing that I wanted to talk about was I really loved the monologues, especially the monologues they had. They had some of them at the beginning of episodes, but I just really loved the monologues in the show. So, like episode 3, you had Oliver's story about the woodcutter and the crane, and
Mhm.
episode 4, Sid had a monologue about essentially like who are we if not the stories we tell ourselves, and then of course
Yes.
you had Oliver's classic monologue, and I quote, "There are two kinds of stories we tell our children. The first kind. Once upon a time, there was a fuzzy little rabbit named Frizzytop who went on a quantum fun adventure only to face a big setback, which he overcame through perseverance and by being adorable. This kind of story teaches empathy. Put yourself in Frizzytop's shoes, in other words. The other kind. Oliver Anthony Bird, if you get too close to the ocean, you'll be sucked into the sea and drowned. This kind of story teaches them fear. And for the rest of their lives, these two stories compete, empathy and fear." Classic Oliver.
Yeah. Just that was, man, such a good cold open. I love episode 4 with just the pull out of his little space showing it.
probably my favorite episode too. Yeah.
Not quite my favorite,
Really? Okay.
but yeah. But yeah, he's one of the best characters. I think he's third for me. But yeah, it's hard to write dialogue for one character that's believable and engaging and is in character and works for the story and works for the story's themes. And I know Hawley doesn't write every episode, but he oversees it, and like he's good at it, man. Noah Hawley is credited as creator of the show, also credited as the creator of Fargo, who has done 4 seasons of that, and it's really, really good at just not even just holding the camera on the person talking a lot. Like, what was the first one, Warren?
The crane and the woodcutter.
The crane and the woodcutter, and it doesn't stare at Melanie in the coffee machine. It's cutting around to all the other characters, watching them do stuff, and it's setting up the story. It's setting up that episode, which was 3, I think. And it happens a lot more in Fargo, and it's done so well in Fargo. And I'm not going to spoil that. No spoilers for Fargo here, but he he has a lot of control over his stories. Not not physically, not like he's, a like a micromanager or anything, but like he has control over his narrative. He really knows exactly what he wants to do, it feels like, and he's good at seeing it through.
Now, just a quick little side note here. If I understand this correctly, Gene Smart and Rachel Keller, do I understand correctly that they were both on a season together of Fargo, and Hawley liked them so much that he brought them on board in this as well?
Remind me who Rachel Keller is, real quick.
She's Sid.
Is she? Um, Jean Smart is in Fargo. I know plays a really important role in Fargo. She's incredible in that show.
Yeah, I think I remembered seeing
Let
that
me check.
Rachel Keller plays like her daughter or
She might play her
granddaughter.
granddaughter, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I believe I also saw that the actor who played Rudy was in Fargo as well. So I guess we've kind of got do we have the Nolan situation where he just brings
That's
in
not
the
it's not a Nolan situation. That's just how it works. You make friends with the people you work with and you want to bring them onto your other projects. It's not a Nolan
Well,
situation.
they were great in this, so I mean I'm not complaining.
They're great. They're both incredible.
I'm a huge fan of directors having their group of actors that
Oh, yeah.
they work well with,
I think it can work well.
especially
Yeah.
Scorsese. But you know, that's just my 2 cents.
I'm looking for her. Give me 1 second.
Shout out to my guy Cillian Murphy. He's been in how many Nolan movies?
Oppenheimer, Barbie, hype.
I will say, watching this again, I would be open to watching Fargo potentially because I was
Ooh.
very impressed with going back and watching this again. Very impressed with Noah Hawley.
Well, you see,
Should he watch the movie
you absolutely
first
can't watch
before that,
Fargo if
Carter,
you
or
haven't
no?
seen the movie. And I would say, I would argue that the your experience with Fargo, your quality of experience with watching the Fargo TV show goes up with however many Coen Brothers movies you have watched. So the more you have seen, the more you will enjoy it. I personally think. Personally, that's because I'm a huge Coen Brothers fan, and there's a just ton of just connection and overlap just with the way they shoot things, with the way they talk, with the way they act, with the way the stories unfold, and a billion other things. I may recommend it down the road, but it'll be down the road. So
Good to know. Good to know.
yeah, I would absolutely not jump into it right now.
Okay, so I guess I want to talk about a few things. And please know, I really do love this show. I really do think it is solid inside and out, and it gives me movie vibes as TV. And I do prefer the movie format. That's just a personal bias, but again, solid pick, Warren. First thing I want to ask, who has the firepower that they use in episode 2? Because that's a really super useful weapon that never comes up again. So, do you guys know? Because how Homie gets burned and everything like that. Because you see the
Who gets
air turn
burned?
red, and
That's
then
episode one. That's episode one.
episode 1, sorry. But yeah, you see the entire room turn
Isn't
red.
that Carrie?
I thought it was just like they blew up like propane tanks that were there or something. I'm not sure.
So for me, it was just like the room literally got hazy red, and then everything
Yeah,
exploded. So it
it
seemed
did,
very
yeah.
much more superpower to me than
thought that was Carrie.
explosion. Do you guys have anything?
Could have been Rudy. I'm actually not sure. I don't think they ever explicitly say.
Could have been Rudy. I thought it happened again in like 7. I thought it was Carrie, but I'm not sure. Happened on a much smaller scale, of course, but
It's not a big hit pick, but I was just going, wow, when they're going to section 3 to get back David, or to just at least see the damage control that he did, which was visually awesome. The bodies sticking out of the asphalt and stuff like that looked wild, man. I thought it was a great visual horror kind of deal. And not that gory either, just jarring. But yeah, I was that kind of bugged me. I was just thinking, where's that ability? That's really useful. Can we have that back, please? Okay, did the world feel big to you?
feels huge.
I think the world that was explored the most was inside David's head. So
Okay.
yes and no, depending on how you look at that.
I'm talking about distance to locations. So like distance from section 3 to hospital to hideout to the lighthouse, and then the roads therein. Did that feel like a big area or no to you guys?
I don't think I thought about it like that because I think a lot of those locations were even inside of people's heads. And so if you spend like half the show inside people's heads, I don't think the world needs to feel that big.
I thought it did just because of the production design of the house and the base alone. I thought it was really well done. I thought they used the space they had really well, and like they had this thing out in the woods, and it was ton of windows, ton of good time accurate like furniture, wallpaper, little trinkets around here and there that made it feel really lived in and made it feel pretty big to me.
Okay. Then it's probably just me, but here's my I guess grievance
Yeah.
with it is it seemed like they walked out of the same forest or were driving through the same forest for every single shot that wasn't in the city. So like when they walk everywhere. It's crazy. Like it's just something that kind of broke immersion for me a few times when they were carrying Carrie back on the stretcher. Like they didn't show up in the car. They were literally just hauling her through the forest for forever after what was it, the body switch thing? Or when did she get shot?
Yeah, that was between episodes, so I didn't really think about it at all.
Okay.
So, didn't really bother me.
For me, also when they showed up at the lighthouse, they walked out of the exact same type of forest or foliage that was at the home base. The trees were all the same and stuff like that. And then they kind of just camp out and have dinner and stuff in the forests.
They usually get in cars and then get out of cars, though. They just don't show them sitting around in the car.
For me, it just looked like they drove to a different part of the state park and said, "There's the lighthouse." And I was like, I mean, sure, it's still gorgeous location and it saves on money and time and set design, of course, but it just made everything feel like, oh, it's a 2 minute drive to the lighthouse. It's like 2 minutes down to the horse place, and then like 5 minutes away, on the other side of the highway is the hospital and section 3. It for me, I just felt as though I had two filmed locations. And maybe that's asking a lot. I have no idea what the budget is for this, but right now we're watching Lord of the Rings, right? And you go from area to area
Slight
to
budget
area to
difference.
area. Understandable. But to me, it felt more like there was an industrial place and then this forest.
Now, what was
And how far could they
yeah.
really get?
what is the lighthouse you're talking about?
The lighthouse is where the
Where
psychiatrist is.
it was the
who's
fake
the
out
eye.
of the psychiatrist, of David's actual psychiatrist or therapist, who the eye was masquerading as, and it was a trap for them.
Oh, okay.
And where they shoot a
Episode
million
4,
bullets.
it's where
Yeah.
they shoot Carrie.
And where they shoot a million bullets into the house and no one gets
Yeah.
hurt.
Well, they
That kind
dropped
of made me a little
down.
mad. I know, it just made me a little upset. Also, I can also kind of judge that one away as, Farouk or David is using their powers inadvertently to not get hurt and stuff like that. You never know. I think those were the two big ones I had. Something cool that I just saw on IMDb, because I've got it right up here on my monitor, is that Bill Irwin's Carrie is Carry and Amber Midthunder's Carrie is Kerry. And I think that's such a fun thing to do as a writer, because you can take 2 seconds and be lazy and not change the name because it is the quote unquote same person. Or you can do something that really builds the world once you know more about the show, and it's Carrie and Carrie with 2 different names. And I thought that was really well done. I also loved whenever they became one body. Great visualizations and stuff like that. Like when they're in the bathroom and just the second pair of hands comes out or goes in underneath the coat. And when he absorbs her and takes on the injuries and his face slowly gets like more makeup and bruised and stuff. Really enjoyed that. It gave you an idea of how each of these characters really has a sacrifice with their powers. Autonomy, where he just remembers everything, and such a curse that would be in certain scenarios, especially in like your bad day is now forever and your good days are also forever, but which one are you going to really think about more? And David Haller turning to everything else, like he turned to the to therapy, but he also turned to drugs at the behest of Farouk and all that stuff. But there were just some minor things that really kind of brought me out of the world a little bit. And those were the 2 biggest ones. It always felt like the action was happening 2 minutes away. How could the bad guys not know about it? And where the heck is this fire person who can do all these awesome abilities? And does Sid retain the ability of people who she inhabits after a little while or something?
The ability, no.
Because okay, here's the thing though. How and do the powers transfer over? So this is a continuity, maybe error. I'm not sure. Please explain it to me if I'm stupid. At the very beginning, when David and Sid switch because of the kiss, right? Because Sid's ability is when she touches someone or when any part of her skin touches someone else, they switch souls, as how she puts it, right? And so her soul inhabits David, and David's soul inhabits her body, and then she is there with all his power.
Well, they switched consciousness,
Okay.
which makes them inhabit the other body. And then Sid says, because of this to me has proven that people have souls.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it, they switch souls, but they switch consciousness.
Think about it like these superpowered beings. Think of them as like Iron Man suits. When they switch places, she inhabits his body and has the powers that he has. And when he takes over her body, he inhabits her powers.
Okay.
Sure.
So then the powers stay with the body.
Yes.
Then how in the last episode, after Sid touches David, then David touches Carrie, is it? And then that transfers power or something like that? Or so
In the
Sid touches
first one?
David.
Well, that's
It's like Sid. So is that the body swap potential happening? Or is that not? Because at that point, Carrie also takes her fingers, points them in a gun.
well, that's
or
Farouk at the time.
And so Farouk has telekinetic abilities as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, telepathic and I think telekinetic as well. Yes.
because
And those are kind of on top of the host's powers.
Okay, that makes more sense, because I was just going, how does Carrie have this telekinetic ability or whatever to
Yeah, she doesn't.
do harm to Melanie when she's never had that ability before?
Yeah,
And
that's all Farouk.
Okay, so Farouk is just now passing himself from body to body to body and then escaping out into Oliver.
Yes.
It's not Sid's power being transferred to everybody on and on and on.
Well, Sid's power does happen twice. And that's how Farouk initially goes from body to body. But then the last one, I think, I mean, it wasn't really explained, but my take on when David and I believe Farouk was in Carrie at the time, when they're like running at each other and there's like that big explosion.
Mm-hmm.
My take on it, it seemed like Farouk essentially got like kicked out of Carrie and then just flew into the nearest available potential host.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I was just really confused watching that final episode, just going, so Sid's ability transfers now multiple times. But thank you for that, really.
Also, that was when Carrie, that was when the red haze and the fire came up again, when Carrie was charging at David.
Oh.
So that's why I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was her.
Oh, maybe.
But Farouk's in
Yeah.
charge, but he would also use that ability. Okay. I'm happy with that.
Mhm.
But if it's around her, how did nobody else get burned? How did she even get into the building? Sorry. These are questions I should not have asked. It's like I do suspend some belief in this.
Our guy
and
Rudy.
It's good enough. Yeah, that's really. Oh, what was it? Episode 1 or 2 that was the cliffhanger where the eye had captured Amy Haller, and he just sets down that tub of leeches.
Yeah.
Bro, that got my skin tingling a little bit. It was just but then they don't show it, and they let your imagination dwell on it. And then the next week she's got all the ring bites on her arms, and there's a lot of bites. And you're like, bro, and she's still saying she doesn't know and all this stuff. And it's that part I was like,
There's a lot of pretty scary imagery in here. A lot of really well thought up, horrifying images. Like, it wouldn't call it a horror show at all, but it's, it'll make you nervous because it's investing.
Unsettling imagery. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Oh yeah.
I think something that also really helped with that was there were some really cool uses of lighting in the series, both for the suspense parts and in other parts as well. But the suspense parts in particular, they really loved using the color red over and over again anytime Farouk was involved. And so that was almost like a theme in and of itself. But just like the red flashing light, and then there'd be either like the world's angriest boy or Lenny or whatever other manifestation Farouk took. And it's just like it's moving, but because the light is flashing, you're only seeing it every second or something, and it's just moving and it's in different places, and then it's there and then it's not. And it just adds so much to the suspense.
Yeah.
One of my favorite visualizations, because again, you're left with a quasi unreliable narrator at the time, and where David is eating the audio recording from the from the psychiatrist's office, that shooketh me. And it was one of those where it was a really crazy visual, but I didn't find myself laughing. And if you can achieve those two things inside of a tense situation, I think you've nailed it. But because it just intermittently just cuts to that, and nobody else can really tell what's going on, only David sees it, and Sid also, because of the attachment of Farouk to her after they switched bodies and all that stuff, was just, oh, it was a great visual. And then she sees the crack in the wall too, and the hands are coming. Oh, awesome.
It's just such a brilliant way to visualize erasing memory.
Yeah, it is.
And they said it was the one time he might have said too much. And that was also just that one little chase thing. And so now they have to chase fragments of that, of what does that mean? And not in an ethereal way of what is attacking David, because there is something now in him, and that leads them to breadcrumb after breadcrumb after breadcrumb. And it's very rewarding when you find it's rewarding and terrifying when you find out what's going on to David. And the visualizations of Farouk as well were awesome. And even King,
So
the
good.
dog,
Yeah.
which I thought was brilliant at the Halloween scene, where King runs away, but then he sees the world's angriest boy, right? And so what young David is finding comfort in and is being brave for is also the thing that is scaring him to death and wants to kill him. And so it is the I play both sides, so that way I always win. And so Farouk is willing to be anything so that he can stay on one of the most powerful hosts of all time, right? And you see it with greed, you see it with power, you see it with lust even, and you see it with just anything that he can imagine. Farouk will try to play every angle to stay here. And then he finally, when he realizes that David is willing to die to get rid of him, he preys on those who love David in order to survive. And it's a well-written villain who takes every route to live, to not necessarily thrive, but to survive that one extra day, to plan, because every single second he's using it. And so the goal with him early was to be subtle, to just take over, and to just create this fear and to create this unbelievability inside the world that existed there, right? Because if none of the characters believe David, then we're not really going to believe David too. And so tremendous job setting everything up so well, and for great payouts.
And King was also a really cool foreshadowing device, because I don't know how much you're familiar with the character in the comics, but obviously Amal Farouk is more commonly known as the Shadow King. And so just, it's just a cute little dog named King, like very, very subtle foreshadowing. But then I think on top of, we talked about some of the imagery earlier, there were just some really chilling lines of dialogue. Like when I believe it was Dr. Kissinger was talking to David's sister, and he's like, "Oh, King, your dog. David spoke about him often." And she just goes, "Doctor, we didn't have a dog."
Yeah.
Or like you hear like this screaming in the hallway, and Sid goes, "Where are the doors?" And you're like, "Oh." Or possibly my favorite, what's his name? The old guy from Division 3. He's like, "Be careful, it wears a human face."
Unsettling imagery. Again, good stuff.
And the joy that while David's fully possessed, the joy in that David as he just annihilates Section 3 is also incredibly creepy. And then you have the torture chambers, or like the flashing light chambers with nowhere to hide, and everything for David's first psychiatrist and for Amy. Those, bro, absolutely awful. I could not imagine getting tortured. Even like you have like the beatings and stuff like that, even in a way that's just psychological as well. Man, it's crazy. And so David's just the nuclear weapon, right? That everybody wants to use and to control. And you finally see that he might have some semblance of a normal life, only for the ending to also show that, well, there's other bad guys still might be able to take over stuff and wreak havoc. So
Oh man, that scene where it's Winnie when Farouk is controlling David, and you just see Winnie in Division 3, just so haunting, just like dancing and like a complete lunatic, and just like snapping her fingers, and then people are like disintegrating left and right, and that scene was just hauntingly bizarre.
um did the Lenny Kenny plotline do anything for you guys? Because it felt like it kind of came up maybe 20 minutes of screen time total and then blew away. I don't know. It was just something I was like, oh, sure, I guess.
What do you mean by that?
Where it was like there is no Lenny, but there was a Kenny. And it's like this other guy or whatever guy, or
It's
Benny
Benny,
or Kenny.
right?
Yeah, Benny.
Yeah,
And it's
Benny.
like there was this other dude, and I was like, okay, sure. And then they just mentioned that, and I was like,
Yeah, I it's not a complaint at all. It just seemed like, yeah, Benny was one of his friends before he was in the psych ward, one of the junkies he did, that he smoked with and did acid with. And then Lenny was one of his friends in the psych ward, and they're just two different people. One's out of his life now, and one is actually dead. And the Farouk is manifesting himself as Lenny, but he's inside David's mind, so he's mixing him up, I think.
I think it just reinforces how confused David is, and just how deep Farouk has confused David.
There you go. Yeah.
yeah, fair enough.
Nothing super important. It's just, yeah, that's pretty much all it needs to be, like Warren said. But yeah, what I was gonna say, I kind of circling back to the issue of how big this show feels, that you think there isn't a lot of struggle to get places, a lot of conflict could be resolved if the bad guys just open their eyes. I thought the show felt huge. I think something that Hawley does is build his worlds really well and develop every inch of the screen that he needs to. And through just editing, which is so good on its own, but on top of that, like there are so many tiny like insert shots or just match cuts of like less than a second of where they'll set up the entire thing in a different way just to show another perspective, and they'll cut for it super quick, and then they'll cut back out, and it's just a flash, and it's just adds so much to the delusion that you're feeling. And on top of that, there are like some incredible set pieces in this movie. Lord of the Rings isn't over yet, and we're going to talk about that next time. But in my opinion, this show schools Lord of the Rings of Power, at least not the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, in like in its world. Yeah, you have Middle Earth, and yeah, it's a much different type of show because that is about journeys, and that's about getting places, figuring out things about enemies that you have to face, and allying with different parts of the world. And that is Middle Earth is huge, and you have to travel it, and you have to take your time and be methodical with that. But this show, like, never ever felt lacking to me. There wasn't a aside from episode 2, which felt like it was just kind of a stepping stone from the pilot to the rest of the season. Every second really mattered to this show, and it either added to the theme, added to making it a confusing kind of experience, just adding to the vibes of the show, or it pushed the story forward. And set pieces, just some there are hundreds of good ideas in this show, which just shows you like how good adaptations of comic books can be if you give them into the hands of people who care about them and give them into the hands of people who are creatively full of stuff that they want to bring to the screen. And if you let them do what they want. So much of this just on paper just could have been really goofy. Like the angriest boy in the world, like that could have been laughable. Like even Farouk himself, like incarnate, like that could have been like something stupid that looked like really weird, like this big demon in a fat suit, like walking around. But it didn't. It's terrifying. It's really haunting. And just because they switch back from him and Lenny, and they trap you in this space with him, and the lighting is incredible. Like you mentioned, Warren, Fargo has some great lighting too. He knows what to do with his lighting, man. But like the set piece in, I think it's either in 4 or 5. I think it's 5, where they go into the house and they're walking around and it's dead silent. There's no talking. There is no sound. Like just it's just another tiny little detail.
Are you talking
that-
about the one where they had like the dialogue slides?
no,
Oh,
that's
okay.
at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's halfway through the show. It's where they're going in and they're finding. It's right before David and Sid they grab each other and they try to dodge the bullet. So they're walking in the house. It's dead silent and there's just no sound. They're looking for something. And they played a song like when they were walking up to the house, and then
Yeah,
they
yeah,
just
that
cut
was
it
really
off,
cool.
cut off the audio after that.
Yeah.
Like like I said, just another detail that makes it just so memorable. And it's not just them exploring a house. It really just added to the tension a lot too. And that, yeah, also like you said, at the end, like they turned it like drop like the white space, all that blank white stuff in like kind of the space between the astral plane and the real world was really, really good. And then Carrie gives Sid the glasses for the team, and that makes everything in David's mind look the way it actually is, but also black and white instead of in color. And then they turn the black and white into yeah, like a silent movie with the slides, where they make the slides dialogue. Just another thing for like making this climax memorable and different and have it stand out and not be typical, not be what you expect.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really great points. The one thing, not going to harp on it because we're about to talk about Rings of Power, but I will say I disagree with you about the world building of the expanse of the world in Rings of Power. But
We'll get
yeah,
to that.
a lot of the show just does so many cool things, seemingly for no reason other than just be different. And it's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's interesting. It's just so fun to watch when they just take the time to care about it and take the time to, when the creators really just take the time to unleash their own minds into a show and not just set up the camera, here's what's in the script today.
And to circle back to something you're talking about earlier, I think one of the things you're talking about, the like flashing between different shots and only seeing certain shots for like just flashes. Some of those shots just do so much because we're seeing the story through David's point of view. Some of these we're seeing like the way his mind works through these flashes because his mind keeps switching between these different tracks. And so we're only seeing flashes of these different things or different pieces, and we have to puzzle it all together. And it was just so cool to visualize how David's trying to process all these different things at the same time.
Warren, please watch Memento. Just saying.
We'll get to that when
Oh
we
yeah.
see Oppenheimer.
There's a lot of other films and shows that I've seen that have really good parts, but they're not all entirely good. And this show felt like every single part of it was polished, refined, and well put together. I have like a few grievances with it, right? But over the course of what, 8 hours or something of total screen time, that's really, really solid. To keep your story tight, to keep your characters tight, also to not have any incredibly bad immersion breaking experiences for me, because for me as a viewer, if I break immersion, it's over, and I don't really believe that's a unique thing in any way, right? And just, you really do get this fear that every character has for their own life, for the lives of those around them, and really for what they've chosen to care about and to love. And for a lot of people, it boils down to something a whole lot simpler, or just really simple. I care about person A. I care about person B. I care about scenario C. And as a viewer, I can relate to that. I care about this particular thing. It's not and I hate to do this again, but it's not this cosmic world ending, life as a whole is dying, multiverse crashing experience. It's the people I care about are going to die unless I do something about it. And it's a very, very compelling plot line that has been used over and over and over again to large amounts of success. And I think that this is far and away one of the successes. Because right now, in terms of where the story is, they're not trying to win the war. They're trying to care for each other and stay alive. And I just love that simplicity, but how and in that simplicity, how compelling it can be.
I think a lot of that also has to do with because so much is focused on David and his own mind and David battling himself and trying to figure out what's real. And because I see the central struggle as David versus himself, it really helps the stories feel rooted in his character. And a lot of the struggles that he's going through, stuff that everyone can relate to. And so I think that makes it, you feel the stakes of the story even without, like you're saying, those multiversal stakes. We care about David because, we've spent time with David. We can relate to David, and he's going through things that everyone has at least gone through, something somewhat adjacent to at some point.
One question I have is, how did the ex-girlfriend, I forget her name,
Philly?
Sure, know about Section 3, but not being, Division 3. Sorry, I think I've said Section 3 this entire podcast. Well, you didn't correct me the first time, man. Oh my gosh.
I just thought it was funny.
Right, well, Section 3 sounds better. And how did she know, but she wasn't under the regime of them? Because it seems like everybody else because she says to Ptolemy and to Sid when they're at this real estate thing or whatever, right? Because she works at the real estate place. And Sid is sitting there talking to her, which she hates. And Ptolemy is sitting beside her reading her or doing a mental history scan, whatever it is. He's a download of her brain. And then when they leave, Sid asks her, do you have anything that you want me to pass on to David? And she says something along the lines of, they have eyes everywhere, or they're always watching. And it kind of made me a little curious as to how is she not under, since she's seen the power and everything, why isn't she tucked away in the nut house along with the psychiatrists and the sister? It just seemed like she would be someone who'd be interrogated and tortured a little more. I don't know.
Well, I think there's implying that she was at least interrogated, and presumably she didn't really know that much.
Okay, sure. That's fair. I also, to counteract that with something that I love, is how Farouk grows in size over the course of the show. Or at least to me, it appeared as though he did. Because the first time we see him, he's kind of like this little, he's this little munchkin in the corner with those crazy eyes.
Yep.
He gets a little bigger.
In the shadows, mostly just the eyes.
And then he's not in the shadows anymore. And then he's in that all white room, the fun cave for the two of them, which is exactly the opposite of what it's supposed to be, right? I love the visual of the red light coming in through those white curtains, of the bathroom being sealed away, of David at one point cowering in the room after he had that change. But no, I thought that room was a great setup with a lot of really good payoffs, and just the way that the demon Farouk in his entirety just became bolder and bolder. And talking about the show makes me want to love this show more and more. One of my some scenes that are my favorite, because I've got a lot of them, are just scenes that are just well thought out and smart and quick and snappy. And the one is where David is talking to himself inside of the classroom. So good.
Yeah, I love that at the end. That's like, and that's your end. That's your reveal. That's what I think was the starting point for them. The animations on the chalkboard at the end. Yeah, loved it. So good. Such a cool visual. Just the room he's in, even just he's on this big chalkboard, just this overwhelmingly big chalkboard that he's got to write stuff down on. He's just working through his mind, working through his revelations, and then just revealing the entire story to the audience. And that was the moment, I think, where I was like, okay, they had this in mind. They had, I don't want to say the ending, but they had a set thing in mind, and that they knew their story, and they weren't going to tell the audience their story, but they're going to work backwards, episode by episode, creating this giant web of intertwining craziness that they presented to the audience, and then slowly it would unravel and then get to this chalkboard scene where David has to work through his memory and really dig into his mind and bring out who he really was and what really happened to him up to this point in time. Loved everything about that scene.
And they also explain why the Shadow King was growing in size, because it's essentially like this parasite that was almost dead. And
They
it's just
give him
like
his
feasting on
backstory.
David. Yeah.
Yeah. hmm Yeah. Like that a lot.
Yeah, that scene with the chalkboard is super cool because there's a very creative way to essentially info dump
Yeah.
visually and dialogue wise, because it's just David there. But I did love that having
Yeah. Just talking to himself. Yeah.
Dan
Just-
Stevens with his actual British accent,
Uh-huh.
just as the what do they call it, like the rational part of David's mind,
I
and
think
just
so.
the two of
Yeah.
them talking back and forth, trying to figure out what happened in David's life and how he can break free of Farouk's control. It was, yeah, very, very, very fun, very well done.
Yep. Also might have given Hawley the idea like, I can work with animation, and he uses that in a season of television down the road very, very well.
Since we're kind of on the topic of animation, one thing that was a very small thing, but I really appreciated was just the lettering, the title lettering for when it would display Legion on the screen, the title.
Yeah, they would never just cut to black and then show
Some of
it.
those were really cool.
Yes. I'll give you that. Love that. Now that we're just throwing out little things, the use of music was great. I
That
not just the songs they played, but like the way they used them. It was just so good. The songs themselves were awesome too.
the ominous parts. I don't know if it was a trombone or a tuba or what it was, but some of those were just so good at making your hair stand on end.
Yeah. Well, not just the soundtrack, not just the score for the show, but like the songs they would use, like the, pop songs and rock songs here and there. Had some good stuff. Worked well.
Got your dissonant jazz in there as well.
Yep. Was it 2 dance sequences? Both so good.
At least 2. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got one other grievance as well.
go for it.
This
Here we
one
go.
kind of bugged me quite a bit. It's when Carrie gets shot. She gets shot, and it's like, yo. However, you see the bullet come out of her jacket on the screen, and there is blood on the back of her coat. And the only way that happens is if the bullet goes through. Now, in the next episode, Carrie legit says, I have to get the bullet out of her shoulder. And then they go through it and go, I got the bullet out of her shoulder. And it was just a fat eye roll from me. I was like, just tell me a part of the bullet or something, because it's through, my guy. And I don't know. It was small, but it was because the show is so good and so tight so often. It's those moments that really just irk me to my core. And yeah, it was just ugh.
Well, she was shot with a pistol, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know
The
anything about
bullet goes
70s.
through.
I don't know anything about 70s pistols, but typically, like, if it hits bone, it'll crack and shatter. And like part of it will come out, but like you get the little tiny entry hole in the front and a big old entry hole on the back where it just kind of explodes out of.
I'm assuming you
Jacket
mean
might have covered that up.
exit, not entrance. You mean an
Yeah.
exit wound?
A much bigger exit wound than an entrance wound.
Okay.
I messed up saying that. Apologies. So that's jumping through hoops to justify what is very likely a plot hole. But
But
it's
again,
not a plot. It's not a plot hole.
no,
Not a
it's-
plot hole.
it-
Not a
it-
plot
no,
hole.
it's not a plot hole at all. It's a
little continuity
grievance.
error. Yeah.
it's a continuity error. And I was like,
Yeah.
ugh, why? And then why did Carrie's eye get
Because
black
they're the
and
same.
blue
They're the same
when
person.
she was
they got
shot
a
through the
shared
shoulder, though?
injury because she got hit and
Oh,
punched and
did
stuff.
she?
And
Okay.
she.
I totally
We-
thought she. No,
I
I
don't know.
thought she was like.
I love that.
No, I thought
it's
she was schooling everyone,
yeah.
and then she got shot, and that's why she went down. I totally
Okay.
forgot that she actually got hit, because kind of thought she was untouchable for a while.
Yeah, that was great though. One of you mentioned it, so I remember. But like, yeah, like he has a black eye for nearly the remainder of the show. And, a lot of close-ups, a lot of faces, and he's got it a lot. Carries that injury with him, which is cool.
Dude, and
Attention to detail.
her just looking at everybody while they're eating, and you've got the anger because he left her, also mixed with the sadness of missing out on camaraderie, and just it's a very complex face she needs to pull off for the scene, and she nails it in I think it is like the last episode and stuff like that. I'm just like, ugh,
It's
so well done.
7. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like you can see so many different types of pain on her face, and but the biggest one is the fact that he left her, and it is, as the fake hospital scenes do such a good job of, like showing what it would really be like if they were just two crazy people, and just her, she only ages when she's outside of the body, and the way the pain shows up on the characters' faces makes you fear their positions and just care about them so much more. And it also allows me to waive some of the cheesy factors of it, like the reflection kiss in the hospital between Sid and David. So cheesy, but really, really touching and really sweet, that he would just, like, think of a little way to kind of show her that he loves her when they can't touch and all that stuff, even though she wants to, as shown later throughout the show. High praise, man. High praise for this season, man. Really good.
Yeah, and it does take a lighter approach to everything. But it doesn't lessen the stakes ever, I think. It's self-aware, but it's not like trying to be like a cheesy meta commentary on anything. It's just self-aware, and it's just light, and it's just fun to watch. It's not taking itself seriously. And it's funny, but it's also not goofy or like quirky in a really lame way that could have taken it down a peg or two. But it's well rounded. It nails its tone.
I think one thing that was really cool was, and this is only really briefly touched on, but there's the one scene where I just think it's so cool, where the most concerned we are for David at any point, I think, is when he seems like he's normal. Like there's that one scene where they're talking about David and Sid goes, he doesn't seem fragile, not since he came back. And Melanie goes, I know, that's what worries me. And such a good line. Like the fact that everyone knows that something's not right is when David seems normal. It's just reinforces the point so well.
So like for me, that was something that I was happy the show said it out loud, because we, the viewer, can immediately see that David's different as soon as he's back. He acts completely different. And David being okay and happy and being like, hey, I found a way we can hang out, Sid. That just wasn't what he was doing. He was so concentrated on just feeling safe and getting back was it Amy and doing all that. And I would have been so mad if his friends and stuff hadn't picked up on his new behavior. I would not have forgiven the show if they're just going, oh, David's different. Didn't see that coming. That's crazy. But instead, the characters, when he was out of earshot, got together to discuss this very obvious tone change in him. And yeah, I like smart characters.
So I guess I'll throw out a little fun fact here. Did you know that Jermaine Clement, who plays Oliver Bird, he also happens to be in a certain movie that came out this year called Don't Make Me Go, which it's currently my favorite movie of the year. Little fun connection there. But yeah,
He's not the lead in that, right?
no, he's just a minor
He's
character. But
okay.
oh man, he was so good as Oliver Bird in this.
Yep, agreed.
Such a great performance.
Excited to see more of him, see where he goes.
All right, is there anything else you guys want to cover before we jump into
Favorite episode? Favorite 2 episodes? What you guys got?
It's all kind of a blur. I think I didn't like
Yeah.
episode 3, and for some abstract reason I can't really remember, although it might have been one of my grievances. And besides the few continuity errors or things that you guys had to explain to me, I really enjoyed the first viewing overall. 2 is the setup episode.
Yeah.
But it's fulfilling in what it has to be, so didn't mind it too much. But yeah, not bad. Oh, the CGI was a little goofy from time to time, but it's a
But it
TV
was
show from this series. But
really
no.
sparse.
Overall,
Like the first episode,
yeah. Yeah,
Goofy.
bro,
Goofy CGI at
when
the
he
end when they
threw
had to
that
run
rock,
away.
I
Yeah.
was laughing. I
But
thought that was the fun. Just wow.
but like as
Guy
I've said
Rudy.
to you guys, it's one of those things you got to have an action scene at the end of the pilot
Mhm.
just to hook the audience,
Yeah.
But after that, I thought the effects were good, in all honesty.
Oh, like when all the utensils and stuff were going around him, and then they
Yeah,
would pause it and work inside of there. I thought, is that like a layered shot
great
or
stuff.
something? I have no idea how it works technically or what the actual vernacular is for it, but I thought it looked great, and the way the screen would look like fast forwarding and rewinding of VCR tape and stuff like that, or
Mhm.
VHS tape, and things like that when Patanomy was doing all of his work and just going, I can't go here. There or like there is nothing here was really solid as well. And when they had to utilize things they did, if I'm just gonna keep going, I guess what is it? Kid David's adorable, so cute. And when Sid gets to hug him, because either Patanomy or Melanie tells her, your powers don't work here. We're in the mine. So do whatever you want. And she hugs him, and it's super sweet and weird, but sweet. Really enjoyed that. And the only other thing I have is if you guys could explain to me, I'd be very grateful how exactly they got the crown that allows Dave or that separates the two brain or the two minds inside of David at a certain time while they were in the astral plane. How did they physically move something while in the astral plane? I didn't follow that sequence.
Yeah,
Warren?
so Carrie was holding it in the real world, and then Carrie and Oliver hatched their whole plan. I'm trying to remember now. I believe Carrie was the one who actually moved it, so maybe he was the only one able to move it because he was holding it in the real world. I'm not sure. I don't think they fully explained that.
When was it used in the astral plane? I don't remember that
So
really. I thought it was just in the real world.
it was when like David was hugging Sid as the bullets were flying at them and everything froze.
Yeah,
And
that was
then
real world though.
Mm-hmm.
yes, but then everybody was like in the
And
astral
they
plane.
go into, yeah.
But it's like,
Yeah, so
how did
then
they move the
yeah,
crown?
Okay. How
Yeah.
did okay, when they were okay, how did they
Carrie in
physically
the
affect the
astral
real
plane
world? Okay.
took the
Yeah.
halo from Carrie in the real world and then put it on
Yes.
David's head.
Which again, I didn't understand because but it's like, I guess the astral plane is right on the verge of being inside of reality. It's not it's more of, I don't understand how this works more than oh wow, the Deus Ex Machina, the show decided to write in because they couldn't think of anything better. Definitely don't take that angle on this one.
That's yeah,
Because they could touch the bullets too, and Melanie was like, yo, that's kind of hot.
burned
That
by the bullet
hurts.
because you couldn't move it. Yeah. It didn't even cross my mind when they were doing that, honestly. But that
Yeah, I didn't think of it either.
yeah,
Really?
it kind of gets into one more point for yeah, it was just like something they did. I don't know. But like one last point for me, at least I have, is I think the show is really actually trying to say that, the physical realm isn't the only thing that humans inhabit. Our minds and our consciousness are something totally its own beast. And the mind crosses paths with the physical realm absolutely on its own, you know, every second of the day, but it isn't always subjected to the physical realm. It doesn't always play by its rules. It's its own thing. It's separate and it's rarely thought of in that way. But this show is making the case for it, which is cool.
I thought it was a show about mutants. It was a pretty good show about mutants too.
It was a pretty good show about mutants.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I'll bring up is, and I don't want to go into in too much depth, but some of the cinematography is really cool. And correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't there a couple spots where they switched from like full screen to widescreen?
Yes. Oh,
That's that
dude.
great shoes.
I thought it was as soon as they went into the hospital, it went widescreen because that was like seen as like a fake world. I could be totally wrong on this, but I remember seeing that and going, I like that.
I think that's what it was. Yeah.
But yeah, it was as soon as, and they might have done it for memory work too, but I'm pretty sure
It
when they
happened
went
more
to the
than once.
hospital, it went into widescreen. And I was like, yo. And that's, where we have more information than the characters because the characters don't know how to get out of this sticky situation yet.
There were also a couple cool shots where the camera is in like first person and then switches to third person when you're like looking at the mirror. There are a couple really cool shots with that, switching perspectives.
Great camera work all around.
Oh yeah, nothing ever felt sloppy. We can always have more long takes, but no one's perfect
I thought there were
unless you're
plenty,
Vast of Night.
though.
Well, Vast of Night's the only thing that ever really actually gets it right. So everything else is just trying for second.
Don't have to compare everything to Vast of Night.
We must always compare to perfection.
All right, well, do we want to get into final ratings and thoughts?
Sure, yeah.
Carter or Will, who wants to go first?
I'll kick it off, and then Carter, and then Warren, you'll close since this was
It's his
suggestion.
recommendation.
Yep.
Yep.
I give this an 8 out of 10. I think it's really good. For me, anything above a 7, if I'm on, I would probably rewind to the beginning and start watching from there. And it's also definitely something I would recommend to people. That's kind of what that entails. I have the few grievances with it. I also have the super lame bias of I like movie format more. So for me, kind of setting aside the time for here is just not something I'm super into. But in this case, it was very much worth it. The acting is great, the camera work is great, the story's a great payoff. You have weak spots in a masterpiece. So really solid, really glad I watched it. And yeah, I'm overall very impressed with everything in it.
Feels very cinematic, though,
Yes.
The only, it's hard to throw on this as a rewatch again. Warren, you've seen this twice now, right?
2.5 times.
2.5 times. Yeah, yeah. See, it's hard to rewatch TV shows. You've seen Elvis, 4 times in a month, but
I am so
Worth it.
sorry, bro. What the heck?
but really, really well done. I've kind of exhausted my thoughts on it. I would absolutely recommend it. Just go in, jump in, go in blind. You don't need to know anything about it. Yeah, rating, I'd go up to a 9 out of 10. I am really satisfied. Loved it through and through. Only one episode I was mixed on, and like I said, just it felt like, just going 100 miles per hour every second. So many good ideas, so much just thrown at the wall, and it all lands. It all works, at least in my opinion. Well done. Well done, show. We'll be watching season 2.
High praise. Well, I'm kind of in the same boat as Carter here. I also gave it a 9 out of 10. And kind of the opposite of Will. I'd much prefer the television format, but I have my full television rankings, and this is ranked number 11, my favorite shows. So it's up there.
What's number 1, if you don't mind me asking?
I can't spoil that. We may or may not find out in the future.
Well, can I just have it
Either
now?
Daredevil or
She-Hulk?
Expanse or She-Hulk.
Yeah.
I can confirm it is not She-Hulk. I guess, so I've already talked about most of what I would talk about, but I guess the last thing that I want to bring up is, even though it doesn't seem at surface level to follow your traditional hero's journey, it follows what I like to call the Father Delgado hero arc. And to do it justice, I'll just quote Father Delgado. The best heroes, the ones we love and cherish, they follow an arc. Odysseus, Dorothy, Rick, and Morty, they've all walked the same path. They've answered the call, met the mentor, and battled the threshold guardians. They've come out of it stronger than they've ever been. But towards the end of that arc, when the rubber meets the road, the tire blows. Something knocks him down hard, and that hero regresses. They lose everything, become less than they were when we met them, because, well, if a hero is going to be an actual hero, he has to be born again from nothing. A hero's regression often begins with a trauma, one that is in some manner a result of their actions, an unintended consequence of their newfound abilities, the death of a loved one, an uncovered truth, or a dream that, once realized, reveals itself as a nightmare. That trauma shocks our hero and ushers in those same fears and insecurities that held them back before the journey began. But these fears and insecurities that haunt them, they're now amplified, and our hero, now more powerful, can use that power to tear their own life apart. When everything is taken away, what's left? It's important to know that regression is a trick, just like most aspects of story. Our heroes can never actually regress. They can't be who they used to be. That person is gone. That person is dead forever, and they're never coming back. And our heroes, they just can't hit the reset button. They can't undo the most traumatic events of their life. But many heroes find themselves trying to do exactly that. And they dive back into the very life they tried so desperately to escape, whatever it takes to stop the pain, whatever they can do to quell the regret. This is a desperate play to make everything how it used to be. Now, as the audience, naturally, we want to see our heroes at their best. We root for them to save us all, to pull themselves out of their downward spiral. But sometimes the allure of the downward spiral is too strong. Sometimes our heroes are too weak. When that goes down, one of two things can happen. We either witness the death of our hero, or we realize we've been front row to the origin of something else, the birth of a villain. By now, you may be wondering, what is the point of regression? Why watch our hero go through any of this? Because the story isn't about them, it's about us. Heroes make mistakes because we do. They do things they regret because we do. And like most any story told, myth is a mirror, one we hold up to see ourselves more clearly. But that's the catch-22 of the human condition, the inability to see ourselves for who we are. We can often only do it through someone else's eyes, and when we do, we may not like what they see. So as we watch the rise and fall of our heroes, the question we ask should not be, will they be greater? Can they ascend? No. When that rubber hits the road and that tire blows, the question we should ask is, will we be greater? Can we ascend? When the rubber hits the road and that tire blows, we will ask ourselves the question at the center of all myth. Who are we?
Wow, that was. I'll close with John Steinbeck, who just simply said, "A guy got to sometimes." Did you have that quote memorized, by the way?
Sure.
I was reading.
So
Isn't that from Marvel?
If our listeners want to take a guess at,
I am
what that
looking at
came from.
Google right now for who Father Delgado is, and I've got Marvel database from Cloak and Dagger. So
there you go. So as Carter pointed out, next episode we'll be covering episodes 1 through 4 of Rings of Power. So look forward to seeing you there. Anything else you want to throw in?
Dan Stevens, if you ever want to come on the show, let us know. I don't know how you'll contact us, but I don't know.
Alleged listener
Figure it
Dan
out,
Stevens.
man. Confirmed listener Dan Stevens. Carter, anything to add?
Thanks for listening, guys. Until next time, we are the Monkeys, and talking about movies is our business. See you around.